Good evening, I'm Prasad Michael and you're watching Kini News, the show that brings you today's biggest stories. The COVID-19 outbreak and fugitive Jho Low may have more in common than we thought. Inspector General of Police Abdul Hamid Bador has revealed today that Jho Low may have a lot in common with the coronavirus. Both have been active in the Chinese city of Wuhan.
Because of the Wuhan virus, coronavirus, ada intelligence tak rasa yang indicate that?
Sebelum ni kita dapat intelijen mengatakan dia memang aktif di Wuhan sana.
Jadi he might flee.
Mana tahu, saya telah minta KLIA untuk perhatikan sekiranya dia balik dengan COVID-19 ni tadi.
Hamid also reiterated that Jho Low's name is on the Interpol's red notice list. This was after some parties noticed the absence of Low's name on the wanted list on the Interpol website. Hamid clarified that the absence of Low's name on the online list is because he is on the other list, restricted to only authorities. Low is believed to have been offered asylum by a country in Europe since last year, which he said was based on political persecution. In an interview with Singapore Straits Times last month, Low hinted that the country in question adheres to the European Convention on Human Rights. The Malaysia Airlines MH370 tragedy is one of the biggest aviation mysteries the world has seen, if not the biggest. When you thought it couldn't get any more shocking, well, it just did. Tony Abbott, who was Australia's Prime Minister when the Malaysia Airlines MH370 tragedy took place, revealed shocking information in a documentary entitled MH370 The Untold Story. He said highest levels of the Malaysian government believed that very early on that the MH370 tragedy was a murder-suicide plot. Abbott said it was made crystal clear to him within a week that the aircraft was almost certainly deliberately downed by the pilot. The plane was piloted by Malaysian captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. He said while he will not say who said what to whom, he reiterated that it was understood at the highest levels that this was almost certainly murder-suicide by the pilot. The disappearance of the Boeing 777 passenger plane, which vanished from the radar screen while it was on its way from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing with 239 people on board, has continued to baffle the world. The last search operation to locate the aircraft ended in May 2018, when a United States-based exploration company, Ocean Infinity, failed to locate the ill-fated aircraft after searching over 112,000 square kilometers of the ocean floor for 3 months. In July 2018, the MH370 safety investigation team concluded that they were unable to determine the real cause of the disappearance of the ill-fated flight, but did not rule out the possibility that unlawful interference by a third party had caused the incident. "Good night, Malaysia 370" were the captain's last words to air traffic control before the plane dropped off the radar. Lim Kit Siang may no longer be a federal opposition member, but he's still in the business of holding BN accountable. Following Tony Abbott's shocking revelation, DAP veteran Lim Kit Siang has called on the former high-level leaders of the previous government to speak up. Lim went on to call for an international commission of inquiry into the MH370 disappearance as a result of Abbott's allegations. This comes after the Australian Sky News announced that former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott had revealed that Malaysian authorities believe the disappearance of flight MH370 was a case of pilot murder-suicide. The two-part investigation will be aired tonight and tomorrow by Sky News. In 2019, notable American aviation writer William Langewiesche accused the Malaysian police of withholding information, specifically details surrounding the MH370 captain. In his report published online in the July issue of American magazine The Atlantic, William claimed that Malaysian authorities under the then BN-led government hid pertinent information to hide its own inefficiency during the early days of the incident. He said the Malaysian regime was also proving itself to be furtive, fearful and unreliable in its investigation of the flight. He added that accident investigators dispatched from Europe, Australia and the United States were shocked by the disarray they encountered. If you're a female performer in Terengganu, soon your audience numbers are going to be slashed by more than half. Why? Let's find out. A new entertainment guideline will soon be enforced in Terengganu, which will bar female entertainers from performing for audiences that includes men. Terengganu Exco in charge of Tourism, Culture and Information Technology, Arifin Deraman, was quoted by the Star as saying that the guidelines were supposed to come into force in January, but was postponed. However, he assured that it will come into force soon once legal technicalities are resolved. Arifin remains confident that the guidelines won't hurt tourism. Here are some highlights from the new guidelines. Stage performance can only involve male singers and dancers. Performance for women singers and dancers can only be presented to women at a closed venue. Mixing of male and female on stage is only allowed for child performances. The music and entertainment performances cannot be accompanied by excessive musical instruments that can influence the audience to flow to the beat of the music. Muhammad Yusuf Rautha's war against Anwar Ibrahim and his men continues with a minor victory today in what could be a lengthy legal battle. PKR President Anwar Ibrahim's political secretary Farhash Wafa Salvador Rizal Mubarak and Press Secretary Tunku Nazrul Tunku Abaida have lost their respective applications to remove parts of a suit filed against them by Muhammad Yusuf Rautha. Anwar's aides labelled Yusuf's suit a political stunt. Judges in separate courtrooms at the Shah Alam Sessions Court today dismissed the expungement applications with costs which the duo filed on October 25th last year. Yusuf, who claimed to be Anwar's former research assistant, sued the two in September last year, claiming they physically assaulted him at Anwar's office in Bukit Gasing in May that year. March 3rd was set for case management. All parties have been instructed to file their pre-trial documents by that date. Coming up next, we continue our conversation with infectious diseases expert Dr. Christopher Lee. We revisit Atomic Jaya with its creator Huzair Sulaiman. All that and more after this. We bring you more from our interview with infectious diseases expert Dr. Christopher Lee. Today we delve into the topic of how quarantines work and how you can stay germ-free. So diving into the issue of being quarantined as an ordinary person, I would like to know what the process is like.
Isolation and quarantine, it sounds like the same thing, but it's not. Isolation is for somebody who's infected. If I'm infected, currently our protocol that we will be placed in the designated hospital. It's a major designated hospital. For the Klang Valley, it's going to be HKL and Hospital Sungai Buloh. And we'll be kept there and looked after. If we are sick, we are treated. And once we have become afebrile, normally we'll do a swab. And if 2 swabs taken 24 hours apart is negative, then we are cleared to be released. Quarantine are for contacts. So if I'm infected, let's say my wife would be my contact. So she'll be quarantined. Now, she doesn't need to be in the hospital. If she's got a home, she'll be probably kept in the house. The public health people would monitor her movements, either occasionally visits, or most times it's via phone to see how she's doing. If the contacts suddenly have symptoms, then he'll be taken to the hospital to be swabbed to see whether he truly got infected. If not, after 14 days and you're totally asymptomatic, you're well, you're released from quarantine.
Well, let's say I'm in quarantine. Can I escape? Like, how enforceable is it? Like, can I just...
So that's the Infectious Disease Act, for example, and that applies for tuberculosis. If you have proven to be open TB, you know, you cough, and you do not complete your treatment, you run away from treatment, we can apply that Infectious Disease Act to hold you down.
Perhaps a message for our viewers and how they can sort of not catch the virus.
Individually, all of us have a role. Actually, the more important is actually hand hygiene, and it's something we don't think of. If the bugs are on my hand, it is probably okay, but it's when my finger goes to my eye, into my nose, or put things in my mouth. I have a bad habit. I like to put my pen in and suck on my pen when I'm thinking. So we have to train ourselves not to mess around with the face. Ideally, the best way is to wash your hands on surfaces, common surfaces like this. So this is, if you and I have the virus, this table will be considered contaminated. All right, so wipe down with a hypochlorite wipe or spray, whichever you have. I know some surfaces are easier to wipe. This is not a problem. But if it's linen and cloth, it could be a bit more messy because you can't be changing cloths every time. Surface, there are non-porous like this, like plastic, you know, linoleum or whatever. They do not last as long unless there's a big blob of moisture there, like you spit the saliva and it's there, of course it'll be there. If it gets absorbed into the linen, it might survive longer. The other thing is the humidity and temperature. That's why China is always talking about summer, because the colder and the less humid, the higher the risk the virus can live on longer.
Playwright Huzair Sulaiman directed his first play 20 years ago, called Atomic Jaya. 20 years on, and with Dr. Mathur back in the driver's seat, we revisited that play.
Mega projects, the defining prowess of a nation's economy and easily the obsession of a developing economy's leader. In 1998, playwright Huzir Sulaiman directed his first play in the theatre scene with an imagining of what if Malaysia had gone to the extreme of building the penultimate mega project, an atomic bomb. 20 years later, Malaysia found itself once again under the leadership of Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Thus, we ask Sulaiman about revisiting his stage play titled Atomic Jaya and to talk about its upcoming sequel, Nuclear Family.
Malaysia's gone through a change. Malaysians overseas, like myself, I've lived in Singapore for a number of years, but Malaysians all over the world are looking back at Malaysia and saying, could one come back? Also, the United States has become a far less hospitable environment for, I suppose, in particular, non-whites, right? So I think that I try to imagine what would happen if Dr. Mary Yuen wanted to leave the US and come back to Malaysia to see whether she could make a difference. But of course, with the old Prime Minister being the new Prime Minister, yet again, I think there's an opportunity for a little bit of political satire and to look at what would happen if that mania for mega projects recurs.
You think you are who? Who you think I am? You think I China man? I can get such funny things.
Atomic Jaya, which premiered in the March of 1998 at the Actors Studio Theatre in Kuala Lumpur, follows that of Dr. Mary Yuen, who returns home after an extensive academic life in the United States when she is then invited to help Malaysia build an atomic bomb. As Malaysia ushered in a new decade, many questions rose as to where Mahathir's Vision 2020 went. As a nation that is still harboring a developing economy, Huzir aims to mix political satire with science comedy once again, as Nuclear Family is set in the horizon of Malaysia today under the leadership of Pakatan Harapan.
It's very much also a commentary on how Malaysians look at change, how Malaysians look at homecoming, very complicated feelings of home and exile, wanting to change, but sometimes being deeply invested in security and stability and comfort. It's a love letter to Malaysia, I call it, in all its complexity and brilliance and disappointment and potential.
Sulaiman himself is a Malaysian who works at Checkpoint Theatre, which he founded in Singapore, where he is also living. As a Malaysian who lives abroad but is close enough to home to see what is happening, he shares with us his vision for what he wants to see in a modern Malaysia.
I'm an only child. My parents are in Malaysia. I think it's something that is never far from my mind. But speaking to the thought of brain drain, when I came back from my education overseas, I deliberately set out to make a difference, and I think with my early plays in the late 90s, early 2000s, some of the people I worked with, some of the scripts that I managed to write, I do think I managed to put some things into motion. I think being in Singapore, I've still kept a very close eye on what's going on. I wrote a column for The Star, so I was very much sort of psychically still paying attention to Malaysia, and I've kind of stayed very much in touch.
That is all from me today. For more stories, you can go to KiniTV.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook for the latest news updates. I'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Prasad Michael. Thank you for watching.